Hi, this is part 5 of a practical guide for teaching distance learning via Tandberg. And in this part, we're going to talk about the presentation mode. I think this is the most important yet most unknown thing that the Tandberg system offers to help with student engagement. And this is part 5 of 8. Now, one of the challenges in using the Tandberg system is away class engagement. And that is ways to make the class interesting and engaging and personal for the class that's on the far end. Oftentimes I try to imagine what being on that far end must be like, because they don't have a person in the classroom necessarily. All they have is what's on the screens. And so I try and imagine, how can I make that more engaging and more personal? And so these are some ideas that I have with that. And the presentation mode is something that really helps in that. The first thing that I think is that students need to see you. That is, they need to see the instructor. As much as they can, they need to have a camera that's on you so that they can see you talking, and they can see you gesturing and things like that. If you're working on a document camera and they can't see you, maybe they're going to lose out on some of the non-verbal communication that you're using. And so it's a really important thing that they see you in that instructor camera. Second, the students need to see the other students. When there's any type of discussion or maybe group work or things like that, use that student camera so that the students can talk to each other. It's kind of a cool experience, but they do need to see them on both ends. And here's the big one, and this is what presentation mode solves. The students should never be looking at themselves. That is, on the far end, they should never be looking at a camera that simply is a mirror of what they are. That is, that they're just looking at themselves. And unfortunately, this is the default mode. So if you're not using what's called presentation mode, one of the screens on the far end is always simply going to be a camera where the students are looking at themselves. And you really want to avoid that. And it can be done using presentation mode. So this is what presentation mode, or Tandberg without presentation mode, looks like. Basically, always the screens are going to be mirrored. Whatever you're seeing on the near end is what you're seeing on the far end. Now, when the classes are connected, one of those screens is always going to be the far end source, which is typically the student camera that's looking at the students on the far end. And the problem with that is that, notice, the people on the far end are still looking at themselves. No matter what you have on the other screen, they just have this screen that's just sort of sitting there useless. And if you're not using presentation mode, then that's the way it's going to be. And that's, I don't know, it's kind of lame, right? So in this video, or in this part, we're going to talk about how to use the presentation mode, which actually allows you to put two different sources on the different screens in the far end. So the presentation mode is a setting in Tandberg that allows the screen in the away class, or the far end, to be fixed. One of them will be fixed, while the other one can switch between different source options. In the far end classroom, the presentation mode allows one screen to be on the document camera or the computer, and the other screen to be on the instructor or the student camera, or something else. This is really awesome. Getting used to the way this works can be a little confusing, but it's a great tool to make the classroom more engaging, especially for those students on the far end. Also, if you're teaching a non-distance class and you just happen to be in a Tandberg classroom, the presentation mode is one way to have different sources on the different screens in the near-end classroom. So when the classes aren't connected, presentation mode can be one of the ways to get the computer on one screen and the document camera on another, or something like that. So how do you activate this presentation mode? Activating this can be done either using the control panel or the remote. I recommend using the remote when turning on and off the presentation mode. Now, just a little warning, the presentation mode options are going to be different depending on which source is currently being used. That is, whatever is currently on the screen is going to make whatever your options are for presentation mode different. And so it can be a little bit confusing at first. Okay, now if you're going to use the control panel, the presentation mode, it can be turned on and off by these two buttons. So if you're on this camera, you can turn on the presentation mode by this, and you can stop the presentation mode by pressing that. But like I said, I actually really like to use the remote. In order to turn on presentation mode using the remote, what you do is you press the home button, so here, and then you're going to scroll down. This is going to come up on one of the screens, and you scroll down to what's called presentation mode. Now, when you click on that, it's going to give you the options that you have for the other screen. And that's why I kind of like using the remote, because you actually get to tell it which option that you want for the presentation mode screen. Okay, so the options that you have, or that you're given when you turn on presentation mode, are the things that are not currently on the screen. And so we're going to be giving several examples on how this would work. And if you're looking, if you want to put these things on the screen, how to get there. Okay, so activating the presentation mode affects the near end and the far end differently. And so this is one thing to kind of note. On the far end, the screen that has the far end source, that is the screen that's just showing the students an image of themselves, goes away when you activate presentation mode, and it's replaced by whatever you select for the presentation source. The original near end source remains the same. So whatever you had on the screen originally is just going to stay the same when you go into presentation mode. But what the camera that was going on them, or that was pointed at themselves, goes away and is replaced by something that's actually useful. Now, on the near end, the current source is going to go away and it's going to be replaced by what is the presentation source. So you're still going to have a camera where you're looking at the students on the far end. You need this so that you can, see what they're up to. And so whatever you have on the source, this is going to go away and it's going to be replaced by whatever you have in presentation mode. So this is what it looked like. When you activate presentation mode, these cameras are going to go away, or these screens are going to go away and be replaced by the presentation source, whatever you choose to be the source that you have in the presentation mode. So on the near end, you're now looking at the students on the far end and whatever you chose on the presentation. And on the far end, you're looking at the original source that you had and the presentation. Now they have two screens that have content from your side, which is much better than just looking at themselves. So this is an overview. In the next few videos, we're going to look at lots of examples of how this actually works. So tune in for those.